What's going on YouTube? Josh here checking in. In strength sports, especially powerlifting, it's pretty much inevitable that you're going to compare yourself to others. I think that, this can be kind of a dangerous thing, and I'm going to kind of share some of my thoughts on when it's appropriate. So, it's pretty much inevitable that you're going to see online people lifting crazy amounts. A lot of times, especially as a beginner, you'll see people practically lifting twice as much as you are at the same body weight, and it can almost feel kind of defeating that, these people are so much stronger, that you've got so much work to do. You almost feel like, oh my gosh, I could never get to that level. And that's definitely not the thought that you want to have, especially as a beginner. I think that you can look at these people and kind of use them as role models, as something to strive for, but definitely you don't want to kind of look at it in a sort of a defeatist manner. The thing to remember is that these guys who are now elite level lifters were all once beginners, just like you. So that's definitely something to think about. I think when you're starting off, and even really going forward throughout your entire lifting career, the most important person to compare yourself to is yourself. Because, the goal of any strength athlete is progress. And, I've said this before to friends and family, I've never said it on the channel, but I'm a strong believer that progress is progress. So whether your total improved by 5 pounds or 50 pounds, it's progress. Now, of course, you want to get always the most out of every training cycle. You want to squeeze every pound out of you that you possibly can. But in the end, if you're making progress, you're making progress. And that's all that matters. Not everybody has the genetics. Not everybody, that you see on the internet is natural lifter. So if you're a natural lifter and they're using drugs to help them do better, well, quite frankly, you're probably not going to progress at that rate, which is why, as far as progress, it's really most important to compare yourself to yourself. How are you going from meet to meet, or if you don't compete and you just do lift in the gym, are your weights going up? Are you able to handle more volume in the gym? Are you getting stronger? I made an entire separate video back in the past that I'll link in the video about making progress and how you define that. But really, that's what's most important, and that's when you should compare yourself to yourself. Now, I think the most important time to compare yourself to others is when you start doing well. If you dedicate yourself to the sport, you can do well. That's one of the great things about powerlifting, and one of the reasons why I personally really like the sport is because regardless of your baseline level of talent, your genetics, if you really put in the time and the effort, you optimize your training and your nutrition, you can succeed in the sport. You might not be a world champion, but you can certainly bring yourself to be a top level competitor. And once you start being good, specifically on the local, more local meets that tend to be less competitive, that's a time when you need to humble yourself. That's a time to compare yourself to others. For instance, at my last powerlifting meet, I competed in the USAPL, and it wasn't the meet that I wanted to have, but I got first place out of 8 lifters. And, I could have just let that get to my head, be like, oh, I got first place. There were 8 lifters. That's more than there are usually in local meets. Look at me, I'm doing so well. But that's definitely not the attitude that I want to have. It's always important to stay humble. So what did I do the second I got home? I went online and I looked at rankings. And I looked at what the top guys in that weight class are getting. And if you look at, for instance, look at Johnny Candido, who's probably the most famous powerlifter on YouTube. If you take his squat and deadlift alone, that's better than, I would say, a handful of the lifters in my division did for their entire meet, including their bench press. That's the difference. You have to look at people like that who are so much better, and you don't look at them, you don't compare yourself to them when you're a beginner lifter, because it can kind of be a little demotivating. You compare yourself to those top lifters when you start getting decent. And I don't mean to say at all that I'm a great power lifter. I've got a very long way to go until I'm anywhere near that point. But as far as, you know, keeping yourself humble and giving yourself something to strive for, that's the time to do it. Because, you know, you don't want to get to the point where you're doing well in local meets and you kind of let it get to your head and you lose kind of that humble side. You kind of let the ego get to you, and then all of a sudden you kind of, you know, I'm already good, so you don't need to work as hard in training. No, you need to work twice as hard, because if you ever want to be anywhere near as good as those top guys, you know, you got a long way to go. And that's really when it's best to compare yourself to others. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, if you've kind of felt similar to what I'm describing in this video, definitely let me know below. If you liked the video, give it a like, and if you're not a subscriber already, hit that subscribe button. I'll catch you guys in the next video.